When you look at your health plan, do you get frustrated by the fact that it doesn't seem like there's any answers out there for the way that it works? You're used to any other piece of your business where you can look at it and ask questions and pull reports and understand all the inner workings of everything that's going on. But health insurance is different, and that's by design. For a lot of years, the carriers, the vendors, they didn't want you to know because if you knew what questions to ask and where to look, you would find all the things that they were doing that weren't in your best interest. The good news is that we're in a different day and age where it's completely acceptable to ask these questions, and these are questions that you should be asking. So in today's podcast, we're going to cover 7 different areas that I think are critical for you to be analyzing, asking questions about, and most importantly, holding vendors and different players inside your health plan accountable. The goal of it is going to be to really arm you with some new knowledge, some new questions, and some new ways to look at your health plan so that you can deliver better benefits to your employees. I'm Nick Lees, founder of Next Gen Benefit Solutions and the host of the Next Gen podcast. I'm excited to get into this episode, so let's dig in. Number 1, transparency and pricing. This is a good foundational area to be looking at. And what I like to say is that if you don't know what you're paying for something, how can you determine if it's a good value? And it's one of those areas that has historically been the most guarded by the health insurance industry. They didn't want you to know all the dollars and cents inside the plan because if you did, you'd find out where they were hiding them. So one of the things that I ask vendors when I'm vetting them to present to my clients is, how do you get paid? It's that simple of a question. How do you get paid? Ask for their fee schedules. Ask them to show you all of their different revenue streams. At the end of the day, if they're being transparent and they're giving all that information to you to digest, the numbers are all going to make sense. But if the numbers don't make sense, if the math doesn't add up, that's when you need to start questioning, is this the right partner for me? Now, one of the things that I encourage you to do from an accountability standpoint is to actually write into your contracts certain provisions around audits and being able to routinely review the prices and what the costs are associated with your plan. Especially when we're talking something like PBMs, a lot of times those things are fluctuating, sometimes on a month-to-month basis. So a regular checkup is always a great idea to make sure that you're holding your vendors accountable when it comes to a price transparency standpoint. Now, the second thing is service quality, and specifically the quality and the reliability of the service of your partners. At the end of the day, they cost money. So you need to be making sure that they're delivering the value that you expect when you're buying their service from them. There's a couple of different things that you can look at. Number 1 is KPIs. Again, just like any other piece of your business, we're looking at these key indicators as to whether their quality and their reliability is going to meet the needs that you expect. You need to look at things like NPS scores. Do they even do NPS scores? If they're not scoring well, why is it that they're not scoring well? Ask for client testimonials or third-party validations. There's a lot of different third parties out there that do a great job of asking the hard questions so you don't have to, especially when it comes to things like quality and service. At the end of the day, you need to be implementing service level agreements or SLAs with your vendor partners. You need to have a way to hold them accountable and lay out clear and defined goals that you want them to achieve. And when they don't achieve these goals, you need to attach some type of penalty to those failure points, quite frankly. So the number 3 thing is going to be compliance. Now, compliance is one of those things that I've talked about a lot, and you know as well as anybody, it's only getting more complex. So when it comes to our vendor partners, we really need them to be able to step up to the plate and help us maintain our compliance. We need to make sure that they're adhering to all the laws and regulations, both of old and of new. Consolidated Appropriations Act is still being digested from 2021, but there's a lot of things that we know are clear and true and that we need our vendor partners to be helping us achieve. So how do we determine whether they're doing a good job when it comes to helping us out with compliance? Number one is that they validate in writing what they're responsible for. Some carriers will say that they're handling certain pieces of your compliance puzzle, but at the end of the day, they're either not doing it or they're not doing it correctly. So you need to know exactly what their process is. You need to validate all the different pieces that they are going to be responsible for you, and you absolutely have to get it in writing. Without it being in writing, it's really hard to enforce what they said. And that's where it comes to how do we keep them accountable to that? And again, it goes back to audits. Routinely doing an audit, and I would really suggest when it comes to compliance, using a third party to do a little checkup audit, just to come in and maybe it's just checking a couple of different pieces of compliance every year or every couple of years, just to make sure that you're on track. And the third party, make sure that they're not going to give bad information. They're not owned by the vendor partner, so they're not going to cater to what the vendor wants, but they're also not attached to you. They're working independently on behalf of everybody involved to make sure that everything's running smoothly. That's why we have a compliance party or a third-party compliance vendor that we use. We want to give access to our clients to be able to go out and get these independent audits to make sure everything's working to their expectations. So now we're moving on to number 4. Number 4 is data security and privacy. We live in a day and age where it seems like everybody is trying to steal your private health information, your social security numbers, all these things, pieces of sensitive data that can't just be floating out and around because there's too many people that want to use them for bad things. So we need to make sure that our vendor partners are keeping this top of mind, that they have a plan in place to do this. So, some of the questions that you can ask is, what is their data encryption policy? What is the service they're using for data encryption? Is it HIPAA certified? Their storage practices. Do they allow employees to carry a laptop around with sensitive data on it and no passwords or two-factor authentication? Can you see their breach history? Have they ever had a breach? How many breaches have they had? What was the total exposure? These are all questions that you can be asking to make sure that all of your vendors are taking your and your employees' data very seriously and making sure that they're doing everything they can to make sure that it is not leaked to these bad actors. And again, it's starting to become a recurring theme, but you need to have it clearly detailed out in your contracts of what the security measures are, what the level of safety is expected, and having some penalties to enforce these accountability measures, making sure that you have a way to hold your vendors accountable and make sure that they're operating at the heightened level of security that's required in today's environment. So number 5, we're going to talk about claims processing efficiency. And this is really important for 2 different reasons. One is that we want to make sure that it's happening efficiently. Claims are getting processed quickly, but we also want to make sure that they're getting paid accurately. So why do we need this? Well, number 1 is that we don't want your employees receiving letters from a medical provider or a hospital saying that they need to pay a bill if it hasn't been processed. Because until that claim is processed, we don't actually know what your employee is going to owe. The second thing that we need to do is we need to make sure that it's accurate. I've talked about it before. Fraud, waste, and abuse is a billion-dollar problem in this country. And that's not a billion-dollar problem over history. It's a billion-dollar problem, multiple billion-dollar problem each and every year. So we need to make sure that claims are being paid accurately to make sure that your health plan and your employees aren't spending any more than you owe. So some of the questions you need to be asking is, what are your processing times? What are your error rates? What is your policy for things like pre-authorizations and denied claims? These are all really important. Now, here's a slight caveat. When we're talking about some of the more unbundled and creative solutions that we put into place, We also need to make sure that things like claims processing is happening quickly so that we can meet the expectations of our different partners inside of our health plan. So when it comes to things like a third-party administrator, these things are very critical. And from an accountability standpoint, you need to set benchmarks. And these are something that any third-party administrator can help you set. One of the things I like to do, especially when it comes to third-party administrators, is we don't want to set an expectation that they can't reasonably achieve. We don't want to rig the game in our favor because we don't like it when they do it to us. But have them lay out some areas where they know that they have, they could fail, but that if they're operating well and they're meeting the requirements that you've set, they will not have to pay any penalties, but make sure that there's a penalty attached. I can tell you a lot of the third-party administrators that I choose to work with and that I prefer, they're more than happy to put some of their fees at risk if they have failures in certain categories. And one of them is claims processing, because they are that confident that they're going to do a great job for you. Now, the sixth thing is one of those things that I struggle to include in here because I don't think it's necessarily mandatory, but it's innovation. What are your partners doing to be innovative? How are they leveraging technology to deliver a better experience for you and for your employees? Now, the reason I say that I struggled a little bit with this is that there's a few vendors I have out there that, quite frankly, their technology usage is terrible at best. They are not invested in technology. They're not using technology to the extent that they could, but they're awesome partners. They do a really great job. So I don't know that innovation in technology necessarily needs to be a deal breaker, but it's one of those questions that, again, you need to know so that you can set a proper expectation. So some of the questions, what does your tech stack look like? What is your innovation of history? What are your integration capabilities? Now, the last one is probably the most important if you're looking at a vendor from an innovation and technology standpoint. You need to know how well they're going to integrate, especially if you're using any type of HRIS system, bin admin system, or payroll system. Having the ability to integrate your vendors into those pieces that aren't necessarily related to your benefits is a huge, huge benefit for you, your employees, and your HR team. They'll love the fact that your benefits seamlessly integrate so that it makes their lives easier. Again, I don't think this should be a deal breaker, but it's something that you should be asking. Now, if you have a vendor that, kind of touts their prowess to technology, make sure that you're setting requirements that they're routinely telling you about the technology that they're using, how they're implementing it in your plan, how it's going to benefit your plan. And then also make sure that you have a choice, because at the end of the day, not every technology is best for every business. There might be certain technologies that aren't going to work well. So especially if they're going to add any cost, you need to have that ability to either accept or decline some of these technological innovations. The number 7 thing, employee engagement. At the end of the day, I have seen far too many businesses spend lots and lots of money. You might be guilty of this. Lots and lots of money on benefits, and their employees don't even understand them. They don't understand how to use them. They don't understand how they're actually a benefit. They just see it as money coming out of their check and a lot of frustration on the back end. So one of the things you need to be doing with your vendor partners is you need to be making sure that they can help you out with that employee engagement. Now, I'm not necessarily saying that we need to dump all of this on their plate. There's still some responsibility that you need to have, and quite frankly, some of that responsibility needs to come back on your broker partner as well, or your consultant. But it's still a fair question to ask. So ask to review their resources. Almost every vendor partner is going to have some different marketing slicks and things like that they can share with you on ways that they, easy ways that they can give you a PDF file with 4 different flyers that you can put in your break rooms or hand out at employee meetings or, any myriad of things, but ask for those things. Surprisingly, there's some really good vendors out there that this is an area that they fail. They don't have good ways to help you as an employer educate your employees. And quite frankly, if the employee's not educated, if they don't understand how to access this benefit, you might as well not even have it. So that's a good thing to do. Ask them about their engagement programs. And more specifically, ask them about what type of engagement they get. I've heard all kinds of stories in my time in the industry and vetting different partners. I've heard people's, telehealth solutions say that they get 80% engagement. Also kind of go into it with a keen nose. Sniff it out. If you don't think what they're telling you is factual, there's a chance that it's not. I'll tell you, when it comes to things like telehealth, if somebody tells you they're getting an 80% engagement rate, they're full of beans. There's absolutely no way that you're getting an 80% uptake rate on a telehealth program. Maybe there's a scenario out there, but from my experience, I don't think there probably is. But if they can prove it to you, take it for what it's worth. So how do we set expectations around this? Well, it's really setting expectations day one. It's knowing the capabilities that they have. It's knowing what they can do for you, but it's also kind of going back to that technology thing. How can we have them interact with other pieces of our business to make sure that our employees truly understand their benefits? So to kind of recap this podcast episode, I want to leave you with this. Don't be afraid to ask the questions. For all too long, you were stuck inside of a box with an option that maybe you liked, maybe you didn't like it. But if there's one thing that's true, it's probably that you didn't understand exactly how it worked. And it's not because you didn't have the capability to understand. It's because the system was purposely designed to keep you in the dark about certain things so that different vendors could siphon away more and more profits from your business and not give you the quality program that you really want and that you deserve. So it's by taking a vested interest in asking these questions, really diving deep into all your vendor partners. And I know that this can seem very overwhelming for a lot of people. You're trying to run a small to mid-sized business. You don't have the manpower to invest all the time in doing this. What I can tell you is that when you have a good consultant on your team, they're going to make a lot of this easy. Like I mentioned, a lot of the vendors that I choose to work with, I have personally vetted, so I can give you some insights into most of them without you having to do much legwork at all. It's, simply asking, what are the different guarantees will they give us? What are their different processes? So on and so forth. But at the end of the day, the other thing that you can do, because you are stretched thin on time, and I get that, is to start earlier. Again, a frustration of mine is that I've seen all too often that businesses start to think about their renewal when the renewal shows up. Whether you're a small group, mid-sized group, even large group, you need to be thinking about these things really year round. As you have questions, you need to be asking those questions. You need to be routinely checking in on your plan. And that doesn't mean that you need to spend 10 hours every quarter looking into it. It's having those KPIs to quickly glance and, hey, we're meeting these, or maybe we're not. But then you can ask questions and do what you do best, which is delegate to your vendor partner, to your consultant, to your HR team to go investigate why we're not hitting these KPIs, just like we would do in any other piece of our business. But at the end of the day, this doesn't need to be a hard process, but it's a very important process. So I encourage you, if you have not asked these questions before, start asking these questions. Demand the answers and demand the transparency that you deserve and that you truthfully need in order to make good decisions for your business and your employees. Again, hope you got a ton of value out of this week's podcast. I appreciate you tuning in, and we'll talk again next week.